grew up in the shires of England, Nottinghamshire, Staffordshire and Warwickshire. They're my home counties. And I grew up with the legend of Robin Hood. And to me, he was real. I mean, I was born in 1955. And to be taken as a young boy to Sherwood Forest and see the great oak, the major oak as they call it, which was said to be Robin Hood's hideout, or where he hid stuff away. It literally is the stuff of legend. So in no time at all, I was shooting the bow and arrow. By the age of 11 or 12, I was shooting the longbow. And that was the beginning for me. It's my one thing. Now, I had a break because I became a soldier, but after being in uniform, I was the bowman at Warwick Castle, the bowman at Sherwood Forest, and what I've learnt, it's quite a lot. If you look at my longbow here, it's just a piece of yew, old yew, heart and sapwood, the inside of the tree, the outside of the tree. These are repairs that have been made over the years. The string is just ordinary linen string, bound so tight and waxed so heavily. The bow, oiled. The arrows, straightforward. Piece of ash, aspen, that's a hunting arrow, what some people call a horse arrow. There's lots of different kinds, but at the end of the day, you've just got to go for a very simple arrowhead that will cut through your target. There are incendiaries, fire arrows, hunting arrows, but they're all for that one business, war, or la guerre. You see, what happened in my land, England, was there were Saxons and there were Vikings. And over 1,000 years ago, England was invaded. In the far north, the Norwegians came. And then in the south, the Normans came. The Normans came across from France. And they beat the Saxons at the Battle of Hastings, as we call it. But the Saxons had no bowmen then. They were up in the far north of England, already dead or wounded or stranded after a major battle there. 1066, from that moment on, England changed. Ruled by the Frenchmen, the Normans. They became our kings, our masters, and they enslaved England. One of the few weapons they didn't have, but we had, was the longbow. You make it in the forest. You make the arrows simply. And there were many an Englishman, hello you, who could fight back, and fight back they did. It's said that Robin Hood was one of those who did fight back. Well, it was just a legend, just a story, until they found a document, not too long ago, and it was a document about an argument between a Robin of Locksley and Richard the Lionheart. I've actually read a copy of it. Locksley village was in Warwickshire, and when you start to unravel the story, you suddenly have a little bit of real Robin Hood. But if you take the bow even further, it became the main weapon of the English on the field. Such terrible battles as Crécy, Poitiers, Agincourt, where the bowmen, disciplined and well trained, actually beat off or helped to beat off an enemy. Even boys would want to play shooting the bow. 5, 6, 7 years of age, it became law that you practiced every Sunday. As a result, you had us, the bowmen of England. You had the bowmen of Wales, some in Scotland, some in Ireland, but in my view, it's the English bowman that makes it. When I worked at Sherwood Forest, I'd do me shoot and me demonstration and have the most fantastic time with folks. From all over the world they came to see the major oak and, you know, to see me shoot. It was quite wonderful. But the question that often came out was Robin Hood real? Did he exist? Well, you look at England at the time. Yeah, you're going back the best part of 1,000 years ago. King John, yeah? John Lackland, as they say, because he didn't actually own any land. His brother before him, Richard the Lionheart, Coeur de Lion. Now, when I was a kid, Richard the Lionheart was wow. I don't rate him very high. He didn't speak English. He's not buried in England. Is it Caen that he's buried? I can't remember. He spent approximately, so I'm led to believe, 2 weeks of his life in England. And one of his comments was, if I could find a man rich enough, I'd sell him London. Yeah? This guy didn't care. He was just one of those brutal Norman kings, out fighting in the Crusades. John, his brother, he gets a real bad press. He really does. But if you read into the stories and the myths, he was simply a non-effectual king. The Magna Carta, the rights being brought to the barons. They say the common people, but I don't think so. Then the Barons' Wars. It tore England apart. It ripped the heart out of England. And the Saxons, where they could, well, they fought back. Robin Hood could have been Robin of the Hood, Robin Hood, lots of names adopted because everybody wore a hood. Yeah, pretty much like the youth of today. You see them with their hoods up. It's not a modern thing. I'm sorry. But hoodies are actually a medieval thing. Now, take away the name Robin Hood, do Robin of Locksley. Ooh, all of a sudden, we have a man alive. We know he shot the longbow. We know he was outlawed. We know that he was not allowed to go back to his home village. But that wasn't King John who caused that. That was his older brother, Richard the Lionheart. We also know that Robin of Locksley, so I'm led to understand, was mysteriously killed, shot in the back, supposedly on the orders of Richard the Lionheart. Then along comes the brother, the wars. It literally starved England, so they fought back with what weapon they had. And it wasn't long before the Normans realized, hey, let's harness the power of these guys. Let's harness the power of the bow. That's when it began. Something I found when I was a British soldier serving around the world was people's lack of understanding about certain parts of history. I lived in Berlin and operated in Berlin, but I lived just outside as a soldier, and I was fascinated by the city of Berlin. Where was it from? How did it start? But you couldn't get past the Second World War. The fact was, one of the earliest settlements in the modern Berlin that we know was Jewish. Yeah, and when I found this out, I was really fascinated. I would go down to where these people used to live, no longer exist. And that started to spark an interest. So what was here? Who was there? I joined, when I came out of uniform, an English Civil War society. People really worked hard to try and get things right. They wouldn't start a fire unless it was with a flint and steel. The ladies would sew their skirts by hand. And I was fascinated by this, down to preparing the food. That got me bitten by the bug. And when I was offered the job to go and shoot as the bowman at Warwick Castle, I made sure that everything I had on, everything I carried, was as close to originals that I could find. And people loved it. They loved to see the boots, they loved to see the hat. The sword here, this is just an ordinary sword. But if a man had a sword like this, he would be at least a captain, I would say, because these are so fabulously expensive. You have a look at a bottle. No glass. This is common clay. It's a costrel. My cup. It's a clay beaker. That's all it is. No tea or coffee as we know it. No streets as we know it. No fast food. And what I see in the reenactment world is people educating each other and then educating the public that, hey, if you were shot with a musket ball, a piece of cloth will go into the wound, will infect them. They had no antibiotic. Hey, if you don't dig your toilet pit deep enough, it'll overflow. What we're learning from experimental archaeology, that's what I've heard it being called, is phenomenal. We are learning a lot, more and more about our ancestors. And what was the famous saying? Yeah? If you ignore history, it'll repeat itself. Right, so, bag of goodies. This is something so important to every person in history, but we forget about it. I hand this to the kids, and it's adults. I say, what is this? And they go, oh, it's is it honey? Is it this? Is it? That's a block of pure wax, beeswax. This, I can wax my bowstring, wax my bow, yeah? Keep it, because this is so important to me. I have to look after it, yeah? So, just a simple block of wax, but it costs money, yeah? You've got to look after it. Bowstrings. If you look at the end, you will see it's just 4 cords wound together. That's all it is. Flax, linen. This is a mixture, yeah, but it's a good old bowstring, and I keep it, look after it. In fact, I must tend to that because it looks like it's fraying. An expensive beaker, what you would call a cup. That's a cow horn, been cut out, hollowed out. But this one's been lined in silver. I stole it. We talked about the Norman kings of England. The monasteries ruled. They owned most of the land. You had beer, you had bread, all because of the monasteries. Everybody believed. Very expensive. Get off. No knives and forks as we know them. An eating knife and a pricker. So you prick your meat, you cut it, you hold it up and take it in, because they did not want to cut their mouths because of infection. Now you look at these. This is the business end. A heavy bodkin arrowhead and a broad head. Everything, from the goose feathers to the arrow shaft to the iron or steel in these arrowheads. So important. But let me show you some special arrowheads. That's special to me. It's 1,000 years old. That's either Saxon or Viking. Dug up in France. An English arrowhead, a bodkin as they called it. And a slightly earlier bodkin, also dug up in France. These are worthless. A few shillings, that's all. And yet to me, this is the real treasure. This is real history.